Welcome YouTube to another episode of D&D Fridays. Today we'll be taking a look at really a part 3 of the feats within D&D. So we covered all of the feats in the PHP. Now we'll be taking a look at the feats introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and just giving our thoughts on what we think of those feats. But before we get to that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, that notification bell, and comment on down below what you think of these feats and what are some of your favorites and not so favorites. But with but without further ado, let's get started. So first off, we have the Artificer Initiate feat. So what this pretty much does is allows you to pick one cantrip and one first level spell from the Artificer spell list. Intelligence is a spellcasting ability for that, and with the first level spell, you can cast it once per day for free, and you can use spell slots to cast it after that as normal. And then also you gain proficiency with one artisan tools of your choice, and that tools can be your spellcasting focus for any spell that you cast that uses intelligence as its casting property. So the first thing that comes to mind with this is the fact that whatever artisan's tools you pick up, you can use it as your spellcasting focus for intelligence as a spellcasting ability. That means if you decide to be like an Eldritch Knight or a wizard or arcane trickster or something like that, you can technically use the artisan tools for your spells for those classes, as they technically use intelligence as their spellcasting ability.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is an interesting feat because it lets you become proficient in the artisan tools, right? I think that's just an interesting way to double dip, for lack of a better term here, into the artificer class without actually being an artificer, right? You get to take one of their first level spells. You get to pretend that you're really good with tools.
Yeah, personally, I think the good thing about this feat is like you mentioned, is the proficiency in the tools. I think that should be the big draw of this feat, because I think if you're really going for a cantrip and a spell, there's better feats if you're just looking for that, like Magic Initiate. But if you're looking for that tool proficiency, then I think getting that proficiency with a little spell casting, I think that's pretty cool in of itself. Or if you're an artificer and you just want to get more tools.
Right, exactly. That's also another way to to bulk up on your tool set.
Yep. Which on the flip side of things, has a little added sauce on it. If you have an artificer in your party and you're GMing, please add in more tool checks into your campaign besides just thieves tools, because there's a lot of cool tools out there that you can use, from tinker's tools to wood carvers and whatnot, that isn't used a whole lot.
Yep, I agree with that.
The next feat that we have is the chef feat. So first off, it increases either constitution or wisdom by one, up to a max of 20. You gain proficiency with cook's tools if you don't already have it. As part of a short rest, you can cook up special food with your cooked utensils, and you prepare enough of it equal to 4 plus your proficiency bonus. And at the end of the short rest, anybody who really partake in eating of that food, who also spends one or more hit dice, also again extra D8 hit points, and within 1 hour of work, or when you finish a long rest, basically cook a number of treats equal to your proficiency bonus that lasts for 8 hours, and the creature can use their bonus action to eat that, and to gain temporary HP equal to your proficiency bonus. It's not a super powerful feat, but I think it's a thematic and cool little feat that you can kind of give out, like kind of similar to Goodberry and a Song of Rest from the Bard class, kind of mashed up into one. So It's kind of cool, depending on what type of character you're trying to go for. That might be cool. Maybe you're playing as a Cajun chef druid or something of that nature. This might be something cool and flavorful for that. Pun intended.
No, yeah, I actually really like this feat just because it is so flavorful. The the benefits you get out of it aren't, over the top or outrageous or anything like that. I do think getting that extra 1d8, uh, regaining 1d8 of your hit points is actually not bad, especially in the early game. I think that's actually pretty decent. Um, and I love the fact that after a short rest, or after a long rest, you've basically spent your downtime cooking everybody treats, right? That just it's dripping with so much flavor. Yes, again, pun intended there. It's great. I actually really like this feat. I think it hits the spot really well.
Pun intended.
Yes, pun intended.
Yeah, so we're gonna Wizards of the Coast. We are now renaming this feat from chef to pun intended. So next up, we have the Crusher feat. So you can increase either strength or constitution by +1. Once per turn, if you hit a creature with an attack dealing bludgeoning damage, you can move it 5 feet to an unoccupied space, provided that it's no more than one size larger than you. And if you do happen to score a nat crit on your attack rolls against that creature has advantage until the start of your next turn. So that's kind of cool. Maybe you're playing a fighter or something and you get a crit. That means all of your attacks for the rest of that turn is advantage, and now all of your allies have advantage now. So I feel like that's pretty cool. If I was to play this with like a fighter or something like that, and I get a crit on one, especially one of my earlier attacks, I'm definitely going to be action surging that turn, as all of those attacks are going to have advantage as well.
Definitely.
On the flip side, it doesn't pair well too good if you already have a reliable way of getting advantage, like you're a barbarian or you're a samurai fighter or something like that. But it's potentially helpful if you don't have that consistent way already, and the ability to kind of like do a little minor move on somebody can potentially be very useful depending on what your party composition is made up of. Maybe your cleric or somebody just set up like a wall of fire or something like that. Hit them with a maul or mace. Now you move them back into the wall of fire to take that damage again. So I like that sort of battlefield repositioning a bit. Or maybe you want to move somebody next to one of your allies, so if they happen to move, your ally can now take the opportunity attack. There's a few different applications of this force movement, sort of.
Yeah, I like the aspect of it infuses a little bit of that battlefield control into a melee player, just a little bit, right? You just get that touch to where if you need to move somebody to help them get advantage because they're stuck in a corner or something like that and they can't get out or whatever, you can move those. You can push them, like you said, push them into a wall of fire or potentially off of a cliff. With just having this extra feat, right? You don't have to necessarily um, make a strength check against them, right? You can just make a regular old attack roll, and if you do bludgeoning damage, it'll move them. So I like it. I think it's subtle, but I think there's some good stuff in this feat.
Yeah, I agree. Next is the Eldritch Adapt feat. For this, you need Spellcaster or Pack Magic. There's a prereq to gain this feat, so there's that to keep in mind. But should you have those prereqs, what this basically allows you to do is to pick up one of the invocations from the Warlock class. The other little tidbit, though, is if the invocation has any sort of prerequisite of any kind, such as Agonize and Blast, Need an Eldritch Blast, for example, you have to have you have to have at least one level of Warlock with any of the appropriate prereqs. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. So you can't say pick up Magic Initiate, pick up Eldritch Blast, and get this to get Agonizing Blast. Now you still need at least a level of Warlock for that. But it's pretty cool. This is probably one of the easiest ways of picking up Devil Sight without having to go 2 levels of Warlock. And there's a few other interesting application or invocations that you can pick up with this as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that it lets you again dip into that warlock class just a little bit. I, I'm not sure I'm as up on this as I have been with the first three feats. I mean, I think this has got some utility. I'm just not sure how much more utility it has. I mean, again, it's I think these have a lot of potential for adding spice and flavor to your character. But I still think it's cool that it lets you take one of those invocations out of the warlock class.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you happen to be a warlock already, then this helps you to just slightly move past that limited amount of invocations that you do get, especially at early to mid levels.
Yep, agreed.
Next up, we come to what I think is probably one of the best feats out of Tasha's, which is Fey Touch. So first up, you can increase either intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by +1. Um, and then also you learn the Misty Step spell, as well as one first level spell from either the divination or enchantment schools. And then for that spell you pick and Misty Step, you can cast either of them once per day for free, and then you can cast them using regular spell slots as usual for the rest of the day. Now, the thing about this is cool is not only are you evening out one of your mental stats, but you're picking up a really good spell with Misty
Yeah.
Step. And then the Divination and Enchantment schools have I think, some pretty good options there. Like, you have options such as Blast, Dissonant Whispers, Hex, Hunter's Mark, Gift of Alacrity. So there's definitely several more options, not only those, but other than that as well, that I think are pretty cool. It's like, if you're a fighter, you can pick this up and pick up either Hex or Hunter's Mark to increase your DPS a little bit more, especially if you happen to be 2 weapon fighting and go action surge for an extra 96 from Hunter's Mark at 20th level. Assuming everything hits, that is.
No, I think this is a really good feat. Just the ability. Not only do you get an ASI increase, but you get Misty Step for free, right? Just free. Here you go. Thanks. And then another first level spell. I think this is, like you said, probably the best. It's one of the best, if not the best feat out of Tasha's.
Next up, we have the Fight and Initiate feat. So with this, you need proficiency with a martial weapon as a prereq, but you basically learn one of the fighting style options from the fighters class. If you already have a fighting style, then it must be a different one. And then, of course, whenever you gain a get a level that would grant you an ASI, you can switch it out for another fighting style. So I think this is probably a pretty decent one. Not super powerful, but pretty decent. Depending on what you're looking for, the fighter does have some good fighting styles that are pretty generically good. I mean, the defense style is for a +1 straight AC is always good. The blind fighting for 10 feet of blind sense is always good. Um, like
Yeah.
in the dueling style for a blade singer can be good. So there's several good options depending on what you're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like, and I meant to mention this about the Eldridge Adept feat, but I like the idea that as you progress in your game, you're able to switch out your fighting style here with the fighting initiative, right? Because maybe early on you want to be defensive because you're lower level, but as you gain levels and get a little bit more hit points and gain certain type of experiences in game, obviously, um, you might want to switch to something a little bit more aggressive, right? Maybe that's where your character is going. or even vice versa, right? Maybe you start out aggressive, like a Leroy Jenkins, and then as the campaign goes, you figure out maybe I need to be a little bit more defensive and a little bit patient and bide my time, and you can switch it up, right? I like that aspect of this feat, and I should have mentioned that for, like I said, the Eldridge Adept. So um, again, it's not an earth shatteringly great feat, but I do like that it gives you a little bit of that flexibility.
I agree. And you can even pick it up as a fighter if you need a secondary
Sure.
style as well. Like, for instance, if you're um, focusing on like throwing darts, for example, you can pick up the thrown weapon fighting as your fighter style, and pick this up for the archery fighting style, for example, in
Sure.
case your build needs multiple fighting styles.
Yep.
Next, we have the gunner feat. So basically, you increase your dex by one. You gain proficiency with the firearms. You ignore the loading property of firearms, and being within 5 feet of a hostile creature doesn't impose disadvantage on your range attack rolls. This is basically crossbow expert for guns without the bonus action attack, pretty much.
Yep.
So depending on how the one little caveat to that, though, is I would before picking up this feat, I would definitely ask your GM more information about what their rules are on guns. Some GMs might not allow guns. Some GMs might allow guns, but you need this feat for it. While other GMs might just say, as long as you're proficient in like martial weapons, then don't bother with this. I would allow crossbow expert for this. So I would definitely recommend just talking it over with your GM before picking up this gunner feat if this is interesting to you, just to make sure you and your GM are on the same page with this.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You don't want to pick this up and then have it be a wasted upgrade to your character if there isn't if your DM doesn't want to have firearms in their games. But yeah, I think this is a run of the mill kind of feat. I do find it interesting that they created a secondary feat just for firearms and guns instead of modifying the crossbow expert. Like I feel like these two could easily be combined and just renamed into something and have them be applied in both places. But it is what it is, and it's nice to have the ability there if you have that feat there if that's something that fits your character.
Yeah. Next up, we have the Meta Magic Adept feat. So you need spellcasting or pack magic for this. And what this does is you learn two meta magic options from the sorcerer list. Uh, and then it follows the same rules for how sorcerers can do it. You can only apply one of them at a time unless it says otherwise. You can replace them out on an ASI level, so on and so forth. And you also gain two sorcery points to spend on meta magic. Now, the way this is worded is if you do get the font of magic feat from being a sorcerer, this means you get an extra plus two sorcery points on top of that. So I
Yeah,
think this is good for most spellcasters, but I think this is probably a must for sorcerers at some point or another. It doesn't have to be an automatic level 4 pickup for sorcerers, but I think at some point or another throughout your progression as a sorcerer, this is a must have feat.
I 100% agree that this is a 100% pickup for sorcerers. I think that it's pretty much an auto pickup at level 4, just because I think that having those two extra sorcery points early on makes a ton of difference. But that's my opinion, right? That's not how anybody needs to uh, follow. It's not advice anybody needs to follow. So, but I think it is extremely, extremely good for sorcerers if that is the class that you're playing.
Yeah. And even if you're not a sorcerer, there's still some good meta magic options that don't cost a lot. Like, I feel like Subtle Spell is a great meta magic to pick up with this particular one since it only requires a flat one sorcery point. And I think all spellcasters would definitely benefit from two uses of you don't see any verbal or somatic components from this spell.
Sure.
Because
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
without verbal and somatic components, nobody can tell you're casting a spell in a role playing situation. Can't be counterspelled, nothing like that.
Yep. Exactly.
As we say, you can't counterspell what you don't know is happening. And then you can also have that super effective subtle spell suggestion or subtle spell mass suggestion combination.
Yep. Exactly.
Next up, we have the Piercer feat. So this is the second of three feats that focuses more so on the weapon aspects of stuff in terms of bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. I think mechanically it's probably the best one out of the three in terms of for damage. So you can increase your strength or dex by one. Once per turn, if you hit a creature with an attack that deals piercing damage, you can re-roll one of those damage dies, but you must use a new roll. So if you happen to have like a rapier or a longbow or something, and you get that one or that two, re-roll that. Chances are good that you'll get a better damage output for that.
Might as well.
And then also, whenever you score a crit with Pearson damage, you roll an extra one of those Pearson damage dies.
Yeah, this is definitely good. Being able to add extra damage like that is pretty powerful.
I would definitely say it's highly recommended for any archer characters as well as any rogues. I think would benefit from this feat.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Next up, we have the Poisoner feat. So basically, whenever you make a damage roll that deals poison damage, ignore resistance to it. You can apply poison to a weapon or a piece of ammunition as a bonus action instead of an action. You gain proficiency with the Poisoner's Kit if you don't have it. With 1 hour of work, using a Poisoner's Kit and expending 50 GP, you can create a number of doses of potent poison equal to your proficiency bonus. Um, Retains its potency for 1 minute or until you hit with that weapon or ammunition. And then when a creature takes damage from that particular thing, has to make a DC 14 con save, or take 2d8 poison damage and become poison until the end of your next turn. Overall, I think it's a decent spell. I mean, or feat, I should say. I mean, to be able to bonus action coat your stuff in poison instead of an action, that's going to save you a turn in combat or save you from remembering, hey, I got to remember to apply this before combat. This, I, I would say at least half the time you won't know exactly when combat is going to start to apply poison to your weapons.
Yeah, I think the fact that it gives you more opportunity to attack by not taking your action up to apply that poison, and you can do it every turn essentially, makes this feat pretty powerful. But I also think that it's very niche, right? You have to play the right character and have the right set of um, weapons to be able to use this properly, right?
Yeah.
Probably on some sort of rogue makes a lot of sense. Maybe a ranger, right? But um, I think, and it's got, the reason I picked those two is because those two are usually the ones that kind of have the ability to gear towards more of this, type of character where you're dealing poison damage and sneaking up on people and being able to jab them with your dagger or from long range with your arrow. Obviously, it'll work with any martial weapon, right? Because I just think thematically it would be weird to see a fighter or a barbarian take half a second, uncork their poison, put it on their weapon, and then take a swing, right? When you think of a fighter and a barbarian, they're kind of just aggressively going at it, whereas with like a rogue or a ranger, they're a little bit more calculated, So
The one thing to keep in mind with this feat, though, is it's a third part it is a DC 14 con save, so you'll see it going off pretty decently early game, but just keep that in mind that con saves are the best save for enemies, and by the time you do get to late game, enemies will tend to make that save a lot more often. So definitely keep that in mind if you're playing in a high level campaign. This might not go off as much as you would like it to go. So, so definitely keep that in mind, but it's still a fun feat.
Yeah, definitely.
The next feat that we have is what I think is another one of the candidates for one of the best feats from Tasha's is Shadow Touch. So just like Fey Touch, you can increase your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by +1. And then you also pick up the invisibility spell, regular invisibility. And the first level spell must be illusion or necromancy. Other than that, it follows the same rules as Fey Touch. So when it comes to illusion and necromancy, schools of magic, um, the reason why I think Fey Touch might be slightly better is because Shadow Touch, you don't have a lot of option or good options from illusion and necromancy schools of magic. So if you're more of the optimizer and whatnot, this might not do as much for you. But there's still some flavorful stuff in there. I tend to see a lot of people pick up Disguise Self or Silent Image as their first level spell, because those are probably the two best spells that you can potentially pick up from this. So I think this really fits in for more of the sneakier type of characters, maybe your rogues or maybe like your bards or something like that that really want to say, all right, I get invisibility and disguise self. Now let me just get like a good like deck score and a good like charisma score, and I'll be able to infiltrate like the king's party and banquet or whatever a lot easier.
Yep. No, yeah, I agree that this is it's right up there with Fey Touch. Um, and I think Misty Step is slightly better than Invisibility, just from a utility perspective. I think Invisibility has a lot of really good uses, but in my head, at least, I put Misty Step just a little bit higher. But I think taking either one of these feats, whether it's Shadow Touched or Fey Touched, is a great move.
Yeah. The next skill or next feat we have is a skill expert feat. So first off, you increase any ability score you want by +1, which is pretty good in and of itself. Next, you gain proficiency in one skill of your choice, and then you choose a skill that you have proficiency in, which could be that same skill that you picked up with this, and you gain expertise in it. So, if you really want to play a skill monkey or bard or rogue, this can really help add in more of that. Or if you're just playing some sort of character that you only have like 3 or 4 skill proficiencies because of your class, race, background combination, this could be something useful to pick up that investigation, that perception, whatever you are really looking for that character.
Oh yeah, I was. I mean, is this not just an auto include for a rogue? I mean, I think this is actually a really good feat too. I think it's right there at the top of the list. With I do still think Fey and Shadow Touched are a little bit above this, but I think this is right there at the top of the list with the feats and Tasha's. Um, it helps increases your ASI, your ability scores, anyone that you need, and then you gain that extra expertise in any skill, right? And maybe at some point in the campaign, you really need some certain skill depending on the scenario. And hey, here comes skill expert to save the day.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe you're talking to your GM and party, and for instance, maybe you're playing that sort of campaign that's really into like a lot of investigations and stuff like that, but you don't want to play the knowledge domain cleric or something like that to really get those types of abilities checks. This is your way to get it.
Maybe you were just a bookworm as a kid growing up, right? And this is a way to kind of build that into the character and
Yeah.
take advantage of it.
Next up, we have the third of the weapon type of feats called Slasher. So you increase your strength or dex by one. Once per turn, whenever you hit with an attack that deals slashing damage, you can reduce the speed of that target by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. And if you score a crit with that slashing damage attack, you pretty much grievously wound it until the start of your next turn. That target has disadvantage on all attack rolls. I think out of the three, this might be the weakest of the three, me personally. Because I feel like the reduction of the movement speed, pretty most slashing weapons, except for maybe one or two reach weapons, you're going to be in 5 feet anyways. So even if the enemy can't get to somebody else with this reduced movement speed, it's just going to be like, I can't get to the thing I want to, but you're right next to me. Let me just attack you. And then the disadvantage on all attack rolls that can be pretty decent depending on who it comes off on. So there's some situational stuff I think
Yeah.
that can be pretty decent with it, but I don't think it's as consistently good as Crusher or Paraser.
I agree. I think it is the weakest out of the three. And I think it is very situational, like what you're saying. I do find it a little funny that they put in the you grievously wound the enemy there, or the creature in the description of the feat. I find that a little bit funny, but I mean, I think, like I said, it's situational, and so if it fits what you need, then at least you have the ability to take it, right? The option to take that feat.
Yep. The next up is Telekinetic, which I think is another pretty decent feat from Tasha's. So first off, you increase your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by one. You learn the Mage Hand cantrip. Um, if you don't have it already, then you can cast it. Basically, you learn it, cast it without verbal or somatic components, um, and you can make it invisible. If you already happen to have it, its range is increased by 30 feet, um, and the spellcasting ability is increased. But it's pretty much using whichever thing ability score that you chose to increase. And then as a bonus action, you can cause one creature within 30 feet of you to make a strength save, and if they fail, you can telekinetically push or pull that creature directly 5 feet away or towards you. Keeping in mind it has to be either directly towards you or directly away from you. So there's a little bit of positioning you have to keep in mind of. But I think overall, just like Crusher, I think this is really good if if you can really combine it with some sort of environmental thing like a lava pit or somebody or one of your friends set up like a wall of fire or whatever it may be. I think that those situations really make telekinetic really shine.
Yeah, I think this is a good feat. In general, I think Mage Hand can come in pretty handy. I'm not super excited about the extra 30 feet, right? If you already have Mage Hand, I think that's kind of just a nice to have. It's more like a win more condition. Um, and I agree that this is like some of the other feats that we've talked about, like like the Crusher feat in particular. So yeah, I don't not super just not super excited about this. I think it's super flavorful. Like I think it's super flavorful because you're using your mind to move stuff, but I feel like I wish there was just a little bit more, in there.
Yeah, yeah. I think well, I think so. I really like this feat, but I think the one thing that could make it a little bit better is the bonus action push or pull. I kind of wish it had a little bit more range of push or pull to it.
Or even more than just the 5 feet, right?
Mhm.
I feel like moving the creature 5 feet is sometimes okay, but being able to do like 10 or 15 is more often better. It's better in more scenarios than just the 5 feet, because I feel like you I know the the 5 foot thing is like the magic number where you need that's melee range and all that kind of stuff, but I feel like either one, maybe a little bit longer range or maybe a little bit more movement, and this would be I'd probably be a lot more excited about it.
Yeah, I think me personally, keep the 30 feet range on it, but say if they fail the saving throw, you can move them up to 10 feet in any direction. I,
Hmm.
I think that would make it really good, but not like super over the top.
I think that that's actually a really fair compromise, and I agree with that.
Because then you wouldn't be able to push them like super far, but you have some more versatility in how you doing that. And if somebody decides to throw you up and bring you back down, that's only a D6 of falling damage. That's not a
Right,
lot outside of first level.
right, exactly, exactly.
So we come to the last feat for from Tasha's, which is the telepathic feat. So just like some of the others, you can increase intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by +1. You can speak telepathically to any creature you see within 60 feet of you, and you pretty much telepathically speak in any language that you know, and the creature understands you only if it knows that language. Your communication doesn't give the creature the ability to respond to you telepathically, though. You can also cast a detect thought spell requiring no spell slot or components. Must finish a long rest before you can cast it this way again. Although if you have second level spell slots or higher, you can cast it with spell slots as usual. With this, I think it's a pretty decent feat. It's not super over the top, but it's not like super bad or anything like that. Detect Thoughts is one of those situational but pretty decent spells for when those situations come up. Um, the ability to speak to somebody telepathically as a one-way communication. Um, that I think that has its uses. Not not having the other creature speak back to you. I think the other creature could speak back to you, but I can see why they didn't. I guess go that route.
Sure.
But not to say that it doesn't have its uses though. Like if you happen to be under the invisibility spell, or you're doing some sort of scouting or something like that, you can just do this, keep in contact with your party, and just say, "All right, there's 3 people up here by this, that, and another, and whatnot." And now you're now the rest of your party is getting all the information from your scout, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I think this is probably a decent feat option for maybe like a rogue or a ranger or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with most everything that you say. What you said here about the feat. Again, it doesn't super excite me. I think there are some interesting utilities of this, as you pointed out. I do think that there's one. Uh, I'll label it creepy aspect to this feat, is that you can speak to any creature in any language that you know. So if you know Abyssal, you can telepathically send some message to some unknowing person in Abyssal, and freak them out. So I think there is that possibility for shenanigans with with this, but
Yeah, now that you mention it, that would be kind of hilarious. Like you're in the Church of Timora or something like that, and you're talking to like the priest, and all of a sudden, yeah, I'm gonna telepathically send this priest a message in Infernal just to see him freak out.
and he just freaks out. So I think there is definitely a lot of room here for those types of shenanigans, but overall, I think it's fine.
Yeah, and depending on what's going on, that could also be a decent interrogation trick as well. Oh, so you're afraid of demons now, are you? telepathically talk to you in Abyssal. Why are you freaking out so much?
Wow. Wow. Yes, that is another use of this.
Now I just made Bard players excited.
There you go.
So all in all, that really covers Tasha's feats. I think comparing Tasha's feats to PHP feats, um, I think Tasha's. So one of the things that really come to mind, at least to me, is I feel like the PHP had a lot more feats, um, had a lot more feats that really amped up martial abilities, whereas I think Tasha's feats, the good feats in Tasha's really amp up a lot more of the spell casting, the RP, that type of stuff.
Yep.
As there's not really a whole lot of good feats for martial characters outside of maybe fighting the initiated, maybe piercer, maybe crusher. But those are decent at best, depending on what's going on. So that is one thing that I really like about these feats is it's really given a lot of those other characters and whatnot a pretty decent to good option if they can't benefit from a polearm master or sharpshooter or whatever it may be.
Yep. I I think that is a spot on assessment.
Yeah. As when you look at it, things like Great Weapon Fighting and all those feats from PHP, they are super, super good that to this day many people
Yeah.
still pick those up for optimizations. And it's good to have some other options for the non fighters, the non barbarians, stuff like that.
Yep. Agreed. Agreed.
Mhm. So, all in all, I do like Tasha's, but like I said, for a couple of the Tasha's feats, definitely talk them over with your GM and the rest of your party just to make sure everybody's on the same page. But otherwise, I think all in all, the Tasha's feats are pretty good. I don't think they're. I think at worst there might be only like one or two feats that aren't good, but I think for the most part, every Tasha's feat is at least situationally decent at worst, um, which isn't the same for PHP feats as there's PHP feats that are clearly terrible outside of like one or two out there instances.
Yep.
Yes, I'm looking at you, the actor feat, but yeah, I like it, and I'm definitely look forward to seeing how feats come along in the future.
Yeah.
As I'm sure feats are probably going to be here for quite some time.
Yep. I agree.
So with that, thank y'all for watching another D&D Fridays. And until next time, keep y'all lives geeky.
Bye, everybody.